Good morning, dear students. Today I am going to explain you the chapter The Portrait of a Lady of Plus One Hornbill book. This story is written by Kushwant Singh. Kushwant Singh was an Indian writer. Initially, he started his career as a lawyer, but when he just saw the partition of India during that time, he could not move to Pakistan. He stayed in India with his family and he joined journalism. And he was so moved by the incidents that have taken place during the partition of India that he started into writing. His book, A Train to Pakistan, is very famous book. And in this book, Kushwant Singh has described his growing relation with his grandmother, what changes in the relation have taken place, that he has described. And when he is describing about the portrait of a lady, this lady is actually his grandmother. So in context to his grandmother, he has described how his relation with his grandmother grew stronger with time and what kind of changes have taken place in that relation and what were the looks of his grandmother, or we can say he has provided a pen portrait of his grandmother through this chapter by describing her day to day activities. So let us see here. First of all, there are certain expressions given. When we will be reading this story, we will be finding these expressions used by the writer here and there, and they provide a beautiful meaning. These phrases actually, or these expressions, provide a very beautiful meaning to the poem, to the story. Now see here in the first paragraph, he is describing that my grandfather mother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She was an old woman, and for the past 20 years he had known her as an old and wrinkled woman only. And one thing is adding here, that people earlier they said that she was once young and pretty and she even had a husband, but for him it was very difficult to believe these things because he has seen her like that only, that she was a widow and she was old lady, so he has seen her like that, so he believed in that only. About his grandfather also the writer has mentioned here in these particular lines that his grandfather, he knew him through the portrait of his grandfather that was hanging above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. Drawing room is the sitting room, and above the mantelpiece, a piece above the fireplace. If this is the fireplace, so above this place, here it was hanging. The portrait was hanging. Fireplace is something like this. So there above the fireplace it was hanging, and then you need to remember what the grandfather was wearing. He used to wear a big turban and loose fitting clothes. He had white beard that covered the best part of his chest, and he appeared as if he was 100 years old. And he did not look like a person who had a wife or children, but he looked like a person who had lots and lots of grandchildren only, right? And then he said, okay, after looking at grandfather's that kind of portrait, it was almost revolting. The thought itself was revolting, to believe that his grandmother was once young and pretty lady. And grandmother used to tell him many stories of her childhood when she was a child, so what games she used to play during that time. But these things, they felt quite absurd for him. He was not able to believe, and he thought that it's all like the fables. Fables are the short stories, right? So like the fables of the prophets. Prophet means the messenger of God. So the stories of the messenger of God which she used to tell them, so it appeared as if she was telling that stories only. So he could not believe that his grandmother was some years ago, young and pretty lady. Then he said that she was short lady and she was fat and even slightly bent, and her face had crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere. It means her full face was full of wrinkles only, right? And we were certain she had always been as we had known her. And he said that he was certain, even his family members or the people, those who knew her since then, he said that we were certain, all of those people, maybe his friends and all, so they were certain that she had been like that from so many years, right? So, and after that, after reaching that particular stage, nothing is happening to her, no change has been happening in her body. She is like that only for the past 20 years, and she could never have been pretty, right? But yes, she was always beautiful. So he said that he could not believe that she was young and pretty, but yes, she is beautiful. Old people are also beautiful. And she hobbled means roamed here and there, moved inside the house, walked slowly from one place to another. So she hobbled in the house in spotless white. The dress which she was wearing, that was spotless, that was not having any spots on it. Complete white dress with one hand resting on her waist. So because she was old and she was stooping means bent, right? So she was bent, so for that reason, to balance her body, she has to rest her one hand on her waist, right? And the other hand, in the other hand, she used to hold a rosary, and she used to tell the beads of rosary. Telling her beads of rosary means that mala, which old people they usually hold in their hands. So it was something like that, and she used to keep on telling the beads of those rosary. Okay, and then her silver locks, her hair were silver in appearance, means white in appearance. They were scattered untidily, they were not combed properly on over her pale puckered face. Her face was pale, it was puckered, old, and her lips, they were constantly moving in inaudible prayer, means she was constantly saying some prayer that was inaudible, nobody else was able to hear that. And yes, she was beautiful, right? So this line he has used here twice. He said that she was always beautiful, and here he said that yes, she was beautiful. So what he want to say, that her soul was very beautiful, her appearance was very beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains. During winter season, if you look at the mountains, the snow covered mountains, they look very beautiful and very calm. In the same way, his grandmother also looked as an expanse of pure white serenity. Serenity, calmness, right? So it appeared that it was expanse means open, bigger area. Okay, open, bigger area of pure white serenity, and it was breathing peace and contentment, right? She was satisfied. Contentment means satisfied. So she was satisfied, she had plenty of peace. Okay, she had plenty of peace and she was happy. So she appeared like that to him. And then he's describing about his relation here. First, in the first paragraph, he has described about his grandfather. In the second paragraph, he has described about the appearance of his grandmother. Now, in the third paragraph, he is telling about his relation. He said that he and his grandmother, they were very good friends. Okay, they were good friends, and his parents, they went to city. His parents, they went to city because they had some work there, or whatever job they were doing, or for the settlement and other things. So they went to city, and we were constantly means continuously, all the time we were together. They both were together, grandmother and grandson, both of them, they were together. And then he's telling that in the morning time she used to wake him up, then help him getting ready for the school, right? So get me ready for the school means made him ready for the school by wearing uniform and whatever things he has to do. And then while doing all of those things, she used to sing her morning prayers in a monotonous sing song, means a song in one tone only. She used to keep on singing that song so that she had one hope that the poet would listen and he would learn it by heart. He said that he used to listen those things, right? He listened because he loved her voice, but he never thought of learning those songs. And then after that, when he was ready for the school, she would give him the wooden slate, and then this wooden slate she would have already washed and plastered with yellow chalk so that it would be easy for him to write. And then she would give him tiny earthen ink pot and red pen, with the help of which he was supposed to write on the wooden slate. And after that, both of them, they had their breakfast. It was the breakfast of the stale chapatis, the chapatis which were cooked earlier, thick chapati. And these chapatis they used to have with little butter and sugar. After eating those chapatis, both of them, they started going towards the school. We went to school, and while going to school, mother carried many chapatis. She has cooked many chapatis at night, and then in the morning she will hold all the chapatis in her hand so that she could feed the village dogs. Now, in the school, now what he's telling that my grandmother always went to school with me because school was attached to the temple. So he will study there in the school, and grandmother will sit in the temple. And the priest, the person who is responsible for the prayers and cleanliness and everything of the temple, he will teach them the alphabets and the morning prayers. Children will sit in if this is the temple and this is the veranda, so children will sit in the two rows on the either side of the veranda, and they will be singing the prayers in chorus. And grandmother will sit inside the temple, and there she would be reading the scriptures. Scriptures means the holy books. So she would sit there and read the holy books. And when we had both finished, means when grandmother has finished reading her books, then we would walk back together. They would start walking back to the house, and while they were walking back to the house, this time the village dogs, they would meet village dogs at the temple door only. Dogs were aware. See, once you feed a dog, dogs will start following you. They will become aware that you are the one who is feeding them. So similarly, the dogs were known that grandmother will come out from the temple. So they were waiting outside only, and they started following from there till their home only. And while going home, grandmother and grandsir, both of them, they would throw chapatis to them so that those dogs could feed on them. And while taking those chapatis, these dogs, they will growl and fight. They will keep on growling and fighting. Next, he said that when my grandparents were comfortably settled in the city, when he found that his parents, they were properly settled in the city, they got the house and the job settlement, everything was done. After that, they sent for. Sent for means call. Okay, called. So they called us here is grandmother and grandson, and he said that was a turning point in our friendship. That was a thing that has turned the course of their friendship. Both of them, they shared the same room, but now grandmother was not going with him to school because now he was going to some English school, and he used to go in a motor bus. So it was not like village where they used to walk and go to temple, and grandmother would sit inside the temple and he would study outside, because temple portion was only changed into school, right? So here there were no dogs also, And when there were no dogs, then to whom she was feeding? She was feeding the sparrows in the courtyard, in the open area of the house. So there she used to throw the bits of chapatis, and the sparrows were eating those chapatis. Then he said that as the years rolled by, they both were getting very less time to meet each other. Why? Because now the writer was becoming more and more busy in his study work. Earlier when they came to city, during that time grandmother used to wake him up daily, the way she used to wake him up in the village, and then she helped him to get ready for the school. And whenever he was coming back from the school, she used to ask him what he has learnt there. And he said that after coming from school, he had told her the English words and the Western sciences and the learning, the laws of gravity, Archimedes principle, the earth is round, whatever things he was learning, he used to describe those things to her. But all of these things made her unhappy. She did not like all this because she found that the things which English people are teaching, they are totally wrong. She did not believe in any of those things. And she was distressed. Distressed means sad. Very sad. Okay, extremely sad. She was very sad that this English school, when her grandson was going there, he was not studying anything about the gods or the scriptures. And one day when writer came there and he said that he was going to have music lessons, then this thing had made her more depressed or distressed, right? She did not like this thing. She got very disturbed. She had always associated music with lower people, right? It had lewd associations. So she always thought that beggars and harlots, it's their monopoly to sing songs, not the gentle people. Beggars, the one who beg, and harlots are the ladies, those who sing and dance for earning money, right? And these ladies and these beggars, they are not considered to be gentle by the common people. So she did not like when she came to know that her grandson was going to learn music. But she did not say anything. She stayed silent only, and this silence actually meant disapproval. Disapproval means no, right? So her silence only meant that she was not agreeing with the concept that her grandson was learning music. But she couldn't do anything there. That's why she had stopped talking to the writer. She rarely, means very less. Now she rarely talked to the writer because she was not getting time and she did not like the way the things the writer was learning. So she had stopped asking those things. Okay, then next he said that when I went up to university, so this was up to school time only. After completing his school college, then writer went to university. Now he was grown up, and when he started going to university, family member were also well to do, and for that reason they had given one separate room to the writer. And now the common link of friendship was snapped. Snapped means cut, right? The link of friendship which they had earlier, that was actually snapped now. How it was snapped? Earlier both of them, they were at least staying in the same room, but now grandmother had a different room and Kushwant Singh had another room. And then he said that my grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. Resignation actually means saying no to something, right? Resigning from certain thing. And seclusion means staying alone. So she accepted this staying alone with resignation. She resigned from everything. She started talking very less to others in the family. She has confined herself to her own world only. She had stopped talking to others. Right? What she did is she rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. She had one spinning wheel, right? That this kind of spinning wheel, so which people spin, and some threads and all. So they take cotton and then they make threads. So she was just making that only. She was constantly using the spinning wheel since morning till evening, and all the time she was reciting her prayers. She was singing her prayers, and she would never stop doing this thing. She would never talk to anyone. From sunrise till sunset, she had only one work to do, and that was spinning and reciting prayers. But only in the afternoon, she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. So, only in the afternoon, she would stop spinning just to feed the sparrows. Throughout the day, from sunrise till sunset, she used to keep on spinning, but during afternoon she used to relax for a while to feed the sparrows. Okay. Then while she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits, bread here, it could be the other bread or the chapatis. So she would sit there in the veranda and she would break the bread or the chapatis into little bits, small pieces, and then she would throw it out in the courtyard, and hundreds of little birds collected from somewhere, they would come there around her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirping. Continuously, they will keep on making the sound, and that was distinguished sound. Right? So that commotion, bedlam means commotion, that lot of noise. So that noise was created, that continuous noise was created due to the chirpings, due to the bird's sound. She came and perched on her, some came and perched on her leg. Some of the birds, sparrows, they used to perch. Perch means sit or sat. Okay, so past tense, perched, sat. So they used to sat on her legs, others on her shoulders. Some birds were not at all afraid from her. Some would sit on her legs, some would sit on her shoulders, and some even sat on her head also. And what grandmother used to do? She used to smile only, and she never shooed them away. She never said hush to any bird. All the birds, they stayed around her, and it used to be the happiest half hour of the day of her. So this she used to do only for half an hour. But this half an hour was the happiest time of the day for her. Okay, why? Because at this time she was feeding the birds, and birds were all gathered around her with their chirpings. They were sitting over her legs, over her head, right, on her shoulders, everywhere around her. So she just loved that thing. And then when our writer, he decided to go to abroad for further studies, right, he went to London to study. So when he decided that he would go to abroad to study, he was sure that grandmother would be upset. He was sure that grandmother is going to be upset by this decision, right? And naturally, because grandmother loved him so much, so naturally she would be very upset with this decision. I would be away for 5 years, and he was actually going there for 5 years. Not for 1 day or 1 year or few months, it was for 5 years only. And at her age, no one could never tell, right? At her age, one could never tell. So at that age, one could never think that, see what is going to happen, right? Maybe when he will come back, he would not be able to see his grandmother, or like that. Many thoughts were there in his mind. But he said that his grandmother could. His grandmother was able to tell something. She was not even sentimental. She did not get sentimental. Why? Because she knew that it was the time, it was good for him to go out and study. He thought that she would be upset, but she did not show any sign like that. She not even got sentimental, means she did not cry at all. And she came to leave me at the railway station. Even she went to the railway station to leave him, but she did not talk or show any emotion. She was very quiet. Maybe inside her heart she was feeling bad, but she did not show any of the emotion. She did not cry, she did not say anything. And her lips, they were moving in the prayer, and her mind was also just lost in the prayer. She was continuously doing her prayers. She was physically there to see him off, to send him into the or leave him into the train. So she was there at the railway station, but mentally she was doing her prayers only, and her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. So her fingers were telling the beads of rosary, and she was continuously doing her inaudible prayer. And silently she kissed my forehead, and only one thing she did, she kissed the grandson's forehead. And when I left, I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. So while going, when he just left, when the train moved, for a long time, he felt the moisture of that kiss on his forehead, and he cherished it. He kept it in his heart. How he cherished it? As if it was the last physical contact between both of them. He thought that maybe when after 5 years he is going to come back, he will not see his grandmother. Then, but that was not so. But this was not like that, right? So after 5 years, when he came back, he met his grandmother at the station only, and she did not look a day older. She looked the similar the way she was 5 years ago. Now also she looked like that only. She still had no time for words, and now also she was busy with her prayers only. She had no time for saying anything like, how are you, you come back, I'm happy, this that. She didn't say anything. She just clasped me in her arms, and I could hear her reciting her prayers. She just hugged him, right? It's for hug. She just hugged him, and while she hugged him, she was then also reciting her prayers only. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with the sparrows only. Maybe he thought that because he has come there, that must be the happiest moment, but for her, her happiest moments were with the sparrows only, feeding the sparrows whom she fed longer. That day, instead of feeding for half an hour, she stayed there and she fed those sparrows for a long time with frivolous rebukes. Continuously she was saying something, right? Funny, frivolous rebukes means funny remarks. So she was making funny remarks to the birds, and she was constantly saying certain things, right? So she stayed with the birds little more than the usual time, right? And what happened in the evening? When it was the evening time, some change has taken into her, over her. What was that change that has taken place? She did not pray. Every day she used to pray, but that time she did not pray, but she collected the women in the neighborhood. She went and she called all the women in the neighborhood, and then she got one old drum, and then she started to sing. And on this drum she just continued thumping that drum for several hours. For many hours she was thumping is beating, right? So she was like, it was the drum like this kind of drum. So she was continuously thumping this drum on these sides, okay, for several hours, for many hours. And This drum had the sagging skins of the dilapidated drum. The skins, the round sides of this drum, they were sagging. Actually, this was the old drum, so these were sagging. And dilapidated means very old. The drum which was in a condition that can easily break. So that particular drum she continuously thumped, and she sang lots of songs of the homecoming of warriors. When warriors they come back from the fights, then what kind of songs are sung by people? So similarly, that kind of songs she continuously sang. She was very happy that her grandson has come back, right? And then we had to persuade her to stop, to avoid overstraining. Family members, grandson, his mother, his father, they persuaded her with the difficulty, right? So that if she will continue singing songs and continue thumping the drum, then she is overstraining herself. And that was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. And this was the very first time that she did not pray. Otherwise, all the time he had seen her praying only. But that day she did not pray. Next morning, she was taken ill. She was taken ill means she was found ill. Okay, she was found ill, and it was a mild fever. She had little fever. Mild means little. She had little fever, and the doctor also said that this fever would go. But my grandmother thought differently. But grandmother had a different thought. She told them that look, now her end was near, that she was going to die. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life she had omitted to pray, she was not going to waste any more time talking to us. She said that it is almost the last chapter of her life that is going to close. That means she was going to die, right? So what she has committed at this time, that when only few hours were left for the closing of the last chapter of her life, she has omitted her prayer. She did not pray. She had spent time in singing the song and beating the drum. So now from that time onwards, she is not going to waste a single moment in talking to anyone. Now she is going to pray only. All the family members, they protested. They said, no, you need rest, you keep on resting. But she ignored everybody's rest, and she continued praying, and she lay peacefully in the bed praying and telling her beads. She was lying on her bed, but her hands were constantly telling the beads of her rosary, and she was quietly saying her inaudible prayers. Right? Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. They were not able to suspect that she was still alive or dead. But what happened? Her moving lips, they stopped. The rosary from her hand fell down. From her lifeless fingers, it fell down. And it was a peaceful pallor spread on her face. Pallor means the appearance, right? The face at that moment looked very peaceful, and we knew that she was dead. And when they looked at her face, it was totally calm, right? It was totally calm. So they knew that now she was dead. After that, what did they do? Because if any person dies, then the custom is that the person should be lifted off the bed. So she was also lifted off the bed as a customary, and she was laid on the ground and covered her with a red shroud, right? People usually cover people with white shroud, but maybe that was her desire, but she was covered with a red shroud. And after a few hours of mourning, few hours they sat there and they were just crying there only, they were mourning there only. And then many arrangements were to be made, like to find the place where to cremate, and the a priest was to be called for different things. You know that when a person dies, so many things are to be done in the home also. So for making the arrangements, they left her body alone there only, and they started making arrangements for the funeral. And in the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher. They went into the room with a crude stretcher. Crude means rough, right? You know, when a person dies, immediately a stretcher is made. That is totally crude. That is just they take few sticks and they just join it. It's not a proper kind of stretcher. So that is made, and then the body of the person is shifted on that stretcher to take the person to for cremation. So when they went there to take the body, the sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. The sun rays were falling inside the room, and there was light, there was golden light inside the room and the veranda. They stopped halfway in the courtyard. When they brought the body to the courtyard, they stopped halfway, because in the veranda, all over the veranda and in her room, right up where she was laying dead, she was still wrapped in the red shroud. Thousands of sparrows were scattered on the floor. Thousands of sparrows were sitting all around her, and there was no chirping. Every day there was bedlam of chirping, there was lot of noise of chirping, but at this moment there was no chirping at all. The birds were all quiet. We felt sorry for the birds. Mother thought that maybe the birds have come to take the breads, so she went inside and she threw some bread pieces for them. She broke them into little crumbs, but the way grandmother used to feed them, and she threw all of them to the birds. But these sparrows, they did not took any notice of the bread. They did not took no notice of the bread. They did not see towards the bread at all. And when we carried my grandmother's corpse, corpse means the dead body. So when the dead body of the grandmother was carried off from the house, these birds flew away quietly. They left the house very quietly, and next morning the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. The sweeper came and he cleaned those breadcrumbs into the dustbin. The breadcrumbs laid there only, and the sparrows did not eat a single piece of those breadcrumbs. So this is all about in this chapter, about the portrait of the lady, or about the grandmother, what kind of life she led and what kind of devotion is shown by the birds. I hope everything is clear in the text. In the next video, I will be sending you the exercises. In case if you have any doubt, feel free to contact me. Have a good day, all of you.